Hello and welcome to Beyond Top 10 Tennis. My name is Dr. Ashley Berge and I'm your host. I'm the author of 12 books, a CEO of 13 years, a founder of a startup set on data privacy, most importantly an elite performance coach of over 19 years, having worked with athletes throughout Europe, the United States to Australia. Most excitingly, I am the world's leading scientist on coach and athlete performance, specifically behind how to develop a top 10 tennis ranking. My work includes everything from mitigating injuries to conditioning behaviors that set a player up long-term for the long game towards a top 10 tennis ranking. I'm behind theories from the optimal performance theory, optimal behavior for optimal performance, the barrier breaker, the rule of transference to the golden rule. As has become custom, each episode we dive into the latest rankings and results on the WTA and ATP tours and deliver new data implications as shared in my latest release, How to Develop a Top 10 Tennis Ranking, with over 80 episodes to date. Today's insights and key topic plays its own role, like so many other episodes, in developing the player, parent to coach for that road ahead towards a top 10 tennis ranking. So, as always, buckle in and enjoy the ride. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm really looking forward to today's episode because the Billie Jean Cup qualifiers have been finalized and Monte Carlo has wrapped up. And also we've got Nadal back in action with some key ranking movers that I have actually shared over the last couple of weeks with our predictive analytics, and it's going to really showcase how they're just so important because they really set a healthy precedent with these key markers, why players are progressing and or regressing with their rankings, and how that's correlated with their performances. If this is one of your first episodes, thank you so much, but I really would encourage you to track back to around our earlier episodes, let's say from 65 and earlier, where we really shared, I think, key foundations and their respective insights that got us to this point to deliver ranking and results, implications, correlations, and so forth. Essentially, because that was before the release of my latest book, which was now a few months ago, but it was in December, and that was titled How to Develop a Top 10 Tennis Ranking, The Power of the Eighth Key. And it was really important and it still remains incredibly substantial. But since it has been released, essentially for the better part so far of this year, we've really kicked off to share direct implications, which I guess we're over like 20 episodes deep in that respect, primarily because we have, I guess, the foundations further set, and that was my 12th book published, but my 11th book in this area. Granted that one of my books was a fictional release a couple of years ago. But it's really important, I think, to understand those foundations because we do revert back to that at times and recall some really, I think, key points there. So that's just some additional listening and or reading depending on your preference. Those of you, of course, who have been with us for some time now, thank you so much. I really really appreciate you, and I cannot say that enough, because look, without you we would not be here. And I really hope you've been enjoying, I think, this change of pace, but look, without getting, I think, too much, because I know I do have sometimes an extended introduction, though if you do want to, I think, better ascertain our body of work, more of the scientific jargon, the underpinnings there, I really want to encourage you to head on over to AIMA International, and of course track back to those earlier episodes, as well as visit AIMA International to look at our blogs, because there's a lot of, I think, indirect data there, where I've shared a number of articles and thought pieces. I think we're up to around 80 articles now to date, which just keeps growing. Don't ask me where I find that time, but I'm sure it will eventually slow down. It's similar to what happened, I think, at the end of last year. But I really want to, I think, head straight into the rankings. And look, as always, we're going to focus on the WTA Tour, and then we'll switch over to the ATP Tour. But first and foremost, I want to mention something that we haven't touched on for the last couple of episodes, and that is that humanized approach. And typically when we've been sharing, I think, the data implications, performance, and various correlations and so forth, there's obviously an overlap there with human behavior and what it means to amplify that performance, and how various habitual behaviors in life correspond with that and help that. And I know that sounds a little bit complex, but I'm here to, I guess, simplify that and break that down. And so where I'm getting at is that even though we haven't touched on that or we haven't been focusing on that specifically, it's really important to remind yourself and your players, for the coaches and or parents out there, that irrespective of these outcomes, each and every one of us are human, which means we have our respective behaviors, our idiosyncrasies, etc. And it's very important to, I think, modify various frameworks to that athlete. Recall the 7 keys, and if you're not familiar, head on over to AIMA International, and as well as the 8th key. And the humanized approach is essentially embedded in all of those keys. And I don't necessarily always share that, because it's a given that the humanized approach we've been touching on through all of these episodes of Beyond Top 10 Tennis. And sometimes coaches, parents, athletes can get, I think, mistaken in copying a certain athlete or player's game and that given, I think, framework, without, I think, accommodating their own needs, or even from a technical standpoint, but then a humanized standpoint. And each and every, I think, individual has various loads and what they're working on court and off court. And it's just, I think, an important reminder to remember that irrespective of these, I think, ranking fluctuations and their results, some players may be carrying an injury, could be recouping from an injury, or they've had a bit of a setback and they're continuously progressing. But then also those players who are, say, in the top 10, top 20, and then they're regressing, it's really important to note, and I touch on this each and every episode, it's because they've lost one of those keys. Oftentimes it's more than one, because they are required to be implemented into your game on a regular basis. And all it takes is to lose grip of one of those keys for your ranking to fluctuate. So at the end of the day, the core message really is: hold onto those 8 keys. Those 8 keys are your bedrock for your training, and you need to integrate them, implement them each and every training session, and be mindful of them to optimize your results and to track towards that top 10 tennis ranking, and then even more so, Grand Slam success. if you are that club academy player and you're not at this level yet, that's okay. The foundations are number one. And if you're unsure, the pathway header, again, over to AMA International is all there. And I have written all of that to help you. Look at I Am Your Tennis Coaching Guru. That's a text I designed with lessons, planners that inadvertently integrate the keys along the way without, I think, pinpointing or highlighting that they're required, because all of these texts, they're a stepping stone. If you read them from start to finish, but I say finish very loosely because I'm very confident there are multiple texts still to come. But if you follow, I think, how they've been designed, then it also works in tandem to get you there. Okay, that's enough about that without, I think, elaborating too much. So let's head on over to WTA and the rankings. All right, sitting at 100, we've got Erica Andreeva. It's a slight regression there. She cracked into the top 100, I think, a couple of weeks ago. Her performance has, let's say, it's been steady despite a slight regression, because she has been hovering between 100 and 90. And I think she was sidelined a little bit, but we're starting to see, I think, a good level of consistency, even though it's only early on, whether it's qualifying first rounds at this stage. Let's remember, she is 19 years of age. So this is actually quite healthy and very good to watch, irrespective of there being a number of teenagers inside the top 100, which is incredible. And they really need to be commended for that. We have to be very mindful of those peak performance cycles, again, that I've touched on in earlier episodes, and how we can maintain that and then track towards the top 100. Daria Saville, she's cracked back into the top 100. She's an Aussie. She's had a very good performance at the Billie Jean Cup, though she has been ranked as high as around the top 30 in the world a couple of years ago, but she has battled with a number of injuries. So it's good to see her, I think, steady now inside the top 100. Benchik, she is slightly regressing. She's at 91, but in all fairness, she's not active. She has taken time away from tour. How about this? Buzas Maniero, 90 in the world. She has cracked back into the top 100, 21 years of age, 12 points of progression. We will touch on that later, because she had some very impressive results over the past week with the tournaments that have been underway. Hibino, from 29-year-old from Japan, she's regressed 6 points. Tomova, 29-year-old from Bulgaria, she's regressed 7 back to 81. Masarova's up 3 at 80, 24-year-old from Spain. Trevisan, the Italian, she's up 3 points to 78. Most other players within this ranking range have been holding their own, because there haven't been that many ranking movers on the WTA over the past week. Some players I'm going to point out: Podoroska's 65, Osorio's 63, Schneider's 62, Kennan's 61. And I just want to be, I think, mindful of that for what's to come. Lynette's at 60. But all of these players have maintained their ranking from the past week. Cocchiareto's at 55. All of these players have had some relatively, let's say, performance peaks so far this season, but they've also had some subtle regressions, and that's why they're hovering, let's say, outside the top 50. But they do have the capacity to break into the top 50 if they move their baseline slightly further, which essentially we're talking about integrating one and or more additional keys into their game. Mira Andreeva, she's at 43. She did get as high as, I think it was around 35, 34 in the world. She hasn't been playing, I think, as much. Let's remember, she's 16 years of age, and she is an absolute, let's say she's on those peak performance metrics. although similar to her sister, just has been pulling back a little bit. But I think that's a very smart and healthy move, not to overload, because I think both and or one of them, I'm not too sure which one, did have a slight injury that they were dealing with, and it is a very good move to just reduce that schedule, to work on those key foundations that has propelled both of them now inside the top 100. All right, inside the top 40 we go. Most players are remaining very steady. Noskova's at 31. She was in the 20s, but I did touch on that last week. Kalinina's at 32. She's actually having a very stellar year. Yastremska, 33. Fernandez at 34. Vekic slightly back at 37, though that is the same from last week, and Stevens is at 39. She has actually regressed 1 point. All right, inside the top 30, familiar names here. We've got Bultus holding strong, 28. So stays at 29, and Mertens is at 30. Kalinskaya 26, Azarenka 25, Krejcikova's 24. Let's remember a few years ago now, she did win Roland Garros, and given that it's Clay's season, it's going to be very interesting to see if her ranking does progress. Ideally, that's going to be the case. That said, Krejcikova has not been playing the same level as, let's say, what we saw maybe 2 to 3 seasons ago. Does she have it in her? Of course she does. I don't think you can ever write off any player that has won a Grand Slam and is still holding their own inside the top 30. Similar with Azarenka, with a number of slams to her name, holding strong at 25 now. And I think it's often forgotten that Azarenka, she's 34 years of age now, and similar, Krejcikova, she's up to 28. And both of these peaked very early on in their 20s, and they are holding their own. Even though there's a couple of years there separating the two. Obviously, Krejcikova came along well after Azarenka with her peak, etc. All right, Garcia's 23, and I think that she's holding quite firmly there. We know she's been inside the top 10, and that she did win the season-ending championships a few seasons ago. And I'm going to touch on, I think, her level of play shortly when we get again to the Billie Jean Cup. Navarro's holding her own. Each and every player currently inside the top 20, we have not seen any movers. Everyone's holding their own here. Look, Kazatkina, she's still just on the cusp of the top 10, which is really interesting. Ostapenko, she's at 10. Jabor's back to 9, but we touched on this last week. Vondrousova's 8. We've got Zheng at 7. We will see her, I'm sure, regress backwards, but it's going to be very interesting to see. I did write up one of my articles in the last fortnight around these rankings inside the top 10 and how only 50% of the current top 10 on both tours, but I think it's more evident on the WTA tour, are performing in line with their ranking. Earlier on in the season, it was a little bit different, but if we're really narrowing it down over the last, let's say, 4 to 8 weeks, really 50% of these players are performing as expected as top 10 players, but from the likes of Ostapenko, Jabor, Vondrousova, and Zheng, they are behind, I'll say, the 8 ball. Even though there's 4, Sakari is back inside the top 10, but I'm going to throw Pegula then in there. But then also Sabalenka, there's a bit of a fluctuation there. But we have to remember there's a very high threshold here for the top 10. So it's not that they're playing poorly or badly, because come on, they're ranked inside the top 10. However, there's a handful of these players that have enough ranking points that are protecting them to allow them to maintain a hold inside the top 10, irrespective of their current performances. So recall 2% of players every season inside the top 10 are going to regress outside the top 10. This year is actually going to be very interesting, because we're going to start to see more of those regressions and those progressions. We know Ostapenko's a new barrier break inside the top 10, as well as Zheng after the Australian Open. Sakari regressed, but now she has progressed. So that's almost evens out but it's going to be very interesting because we have at least 2 to 3 of these players that are more susceptible to regressing out. Obviously, Swiatek is holding very strong at 1, followed by Sabalenka. Gauff is somewhat behind. All right, let's head over and let's start with the Billie Jean Cup, which is really interesting because there's a number of matches to get through. So I'm just going to highlight, I think, what I'm going to share some really big standout matches. And when we go Australia versus Mexico, Saville had a very good win over Zacharias. Rodionova over Olmos, a very good win. And Preston, she made her debut, and so that was a very clean win over Zacharias as well. That's it for, I think, that tie. Australia won that one. Let's go to Switzerland over Poland. Swiatek, super clean over Waltert. Fretch over Niev, very clean. Again, Swiatek over Niev. That's actually a quite solid, but that was 4-3. However, I think as expected, Poland came out with the win. This one's quite interesting. France and Great Britain, because there were some surprise packers here. How's this? Parry beat Bulter 2-0. Let's remember Bulter's top 30. Then Raducanu, who is not inside the top 100 at this stage, toppled Garcia 3 sets. This was 3-6, 6-3, 6-2. So I've just touched on Garcia, almost inside the top 20. This has to be Raducanu's best performance to date. Okay, Bulter, a good win over Burrell. Then Raducanu got another win over Parry in 3 sets, and Parry would have been the favourite in this respect. So it's very important there, I think, to highlight Raducanu had some very good results there. Bulter, some solid results there. Garcia, somewhat of a regression. All right, USA over Belgium. Pegula, very good win over Kostulis. However, it was 3 sets. Probably would have anticipated that being 2 very clean sets, but this is what's pinpointing how I haven't seen, I think, that really clean execution from Pegula this season. We've seen somewhat of a fluctuation, but she has started to hold her own, let's say the last 2 to 4 weeks. Navarro, 3 sets over Van der Winkel. Pegula over Van der Winkel, that was very clean, 2-0. Okay, we'll wrap that one up. Okay, next up we've got Japan and Kazakhstan. Hibino over Dalanina, very clean. How's this one? Osaka over Putintseva, who is ranked ahead of her, and Osaka with a very good win, 6-2, 7-6. Then Hibino had a win over Putintseva, 3 sets. That wraps up that tie. Japan winning over Kazakhstan, but that was very interesting to see the performance of Osaka in this respect. All right, Brazil and Germany. Seigman over Haddad Maia. That's a very good win. Haddad Maia is just from the cusp, so she's inside the top 15 in the world. She has been inside the top 10, and Seigman with a 4-2. Maria over Pagosi. Haddad Maia over Friedman, 3 sets. That was 5-7, 6-love, 6-1. Very solid. And Seidman, very good tie for her, 3 sets over Alves. This is really pinpointing, I think, the differences when points aren't necessarily on the line, but when the slate is essentially wiped clean, and what happens? Okay, we've got Slovakia over Slovenia here. Schmidlova over Milik, straight sets. Harankova over Echevich, 3 sets. Jamiakova over Echevich, straight sets. My apologies for the pronunciation. I really tried to do my best, and I hope it was very easy to follow. However, Slovakia 4-0 over Slovenia. That was a tricky one, a tongue twister. Ukraine and Romania here. Serenko over Bogdan, 3 sets. That's a very good win for Serenko. Svitolina over Christian, very solid. However, Bogdan got one back over Svitolina. How's this? 6-4, 4-6, 6-3. A little bit surprising. That said, Bogdan has somewhat been on the radar this season, because she has had, my apologies, some solid results. And Christian then with a win over Serenko. Romania won that tie 3-2. We know that there are some players that were not present there, though it still was a very solid lineup, and that's why we didn't see so many, I think, changes in the rankings up this week, but also because we haven't seen that many events. All right, we've got 3, I think, big events underway at this stage this week. We're going to start in Rouen, France. Round of 32, very early on. Pavlyuchenkova over Robe, 2-2. She's the first seed, very solid, what we're going to expect. Pavlyuchenkova has been in very good form so far this season, and she's definitely earmarked to progress closer towards the top 15. Similar to Collins. Collins has had an absolutely standout last, let's say, 2 to 3 months-ish. Pavlyuchenkova is on a very similar projection, so it's going to be interesting, especially clay court season now, if Pavlyuchenkova can continue to progress, or if we're going to see a performance plateau, which we have seen a number of times in the past. Rus over Montgomery, 3-1. Lynette over Jackie Moe, 5-1. Stefanovic had a win over Blinkova, 3 sets, 7-6, 3-6, 7-6. That's a very tough match. Kalinina over Cornet, straight sets. Osaka is going to be playing first round. It's going to be very interesting to see how she goes against Trevisan, especially over the Billie Jean Cup, having a very solid win under her belt. See how she's tracking, because it's going to be very interesting, especially clay court season now, if she's going to maintain that progression, or we're going to see a little bit of a regression. That is definitely one to watch. Evanescence over Ferrero, 3 sets. Podoroska fell to Ondrieva, so a very good win for Ondrieva here, 1-3, which will, I think, help her ranking, given that it's been a little bit of a regression the last couple of weeks. However, we're really talking only a couple of ranking points here. Stevens, a very good win over Stearns. That is 3 sets. Really underscores, I think, that's very subtle rankings progression at this stage. She's really being able to hold her own. And that was 1-6, 6-1, 6-3. She does have Pliskova next. She is seated ahead of Pliskova. So that's going to be a very good, I think, indicator for how Stevens is tracking this event. Pliskova, a good win, 3 sets over Kudermetova. Other matches we've got is 1 over Sheriff, straight sets. Burrell over Zavatska, 3 sets. Other matches we've got Cocchiaretto did fall to Garcia, 3 sets. So even going off, I think, the Billie Jean Cup, Garcia's backed that up 6-1, 3-6, 7-5 over Cocchiaretto. And I mentioned Cocchiaretto's ranking earlier as well, because she has been tracking, I think, forward so far this season and is one to watch. All right, that was the round of 32. Round of 16 will be underway from today onwards. So this is one we will wrap up next week. But it's going to be very, I think, interesting to see, especially Pavlyuchenkova, Osaka, Stevens, and how these players are tracking alongside Garcia as well, because there's going to be various implications for their rankings. All right, the biggest one this week we've got underway is obviously Stuttgart, Germany, the Porsche Grand Prix that's underway. Very early on, only a couple of matches that we can touch on. Swiatek and Mertens will play off in the round of 16, which we will report on next week. But the matches so far we've got underway. Mertens, a very good win over Maria, 6-1, 4-6, 6-love. Raducanu and Kerber will face off. It will be tomorrow. That's going to be very interesting to see if Raducanu can back up her performance from the Billie Jean Cup. That said, Kerber started this season, I think, in really solid form. Haven't really seen that since January. So I'm really hoping Kerber's going to be able to amp up her game, especially given that this is her first season back after having time away from the tour. Noskova, a very good win over Ostapenko, 3-1. This is really, I think, underscoring what I've touched on previously about the top 10 and how Ostapenko, she started the season with rapid fire results, ascended inside the top 10, aligned with our metrics. We pinpointed her to crack and break the threshold, and she did that with her performances, but there has been a lull and she hasn't been able to maintain that form she, I think, had later half of last year and really hit the ground running this season. So this is a little bit surprising, but not so much if you're looking at the data and how it's been tracking the last 4 to 6 weeks. Noskova has been steadily progressing. Okay, other matches we've got Krejcikova. She fell to Kudermetova 3 sets, 5-7, 6-4, 6-4 to Kudermetova. Now, I was touching on the rankings and Krejcikova, how she's inside, let's say, the top 30. This result's not going to do her too many favors. So this is a regression for her, but it's going to be very interesting this season what happens. We're going to be very careful, because if Barbara isn't able to maintain her form on clay, there's a high chance she may regress outside the top 30. So we're looking to see if she can hold on to her ranking or crack into the top 20 with more consistent results on this surface. Paolini, very good win over Irani. Irani came through qualifying, but look, 6-1, 6-love to Paolini. She's definitely holding that ranking high inside the top 15. She has had a stellar year from the Australian Open, and especially the last couple of weeks, and it's incredibly impressive to see Paolini holding her own. Definitely one to watch this season. I would not be surprised if Paolini makes the round of 16 at the French. Jabeur will play Alexandrova first round. This is going to be very interesting because Jabeur has been regressing irrespective of her ranking, remaining steady. It's slightly regressed, but still inside the top 10. Jabeur's results have not been corresponding with her ranking though, so this is the chance, especially that it is clay season now, for Jabeur to pick that back up. Zhang actually has got a very good win over Sestaya. Top 10, and we have not seen that level of consistency that correlates with the top 10. So 6-2, 6-3 over Sestaya is solid. All right, other matches we've got Vickery over Sasnovich in straight sets. Goff will play Vickery next. That is going to be interesting. I'm looking forward to that. Vondrousova over Vekic, very good win. Haven't seen Vondrousova too much in action this season. So again, hasn't been, let's say, corresponding with her top 10 ranking. Now, this is one I think to keep an eye out for. Badosa with a very good win over Schneider. Schneider, again, already has a title to her name this season. Badosa has been regressing in the rankings, but this really goes to show Badosa does have it in her. She just needs to find that rhythm again. But look, she has been getting tough rounds, and next round she's got Sabalenka again, and which I think it was Miami she faced off against Sabalenka, and I want to say it was the second or third round. So it's going to be interesting to see, I think, that scoreline, but also I think on Sabalenka's side, if it's going to be really clean and smooth, or if Badosa really puts up a fight and takes Sabalenka to 3. Obviously Sabalenka is favourite for that one. All right, that was a lot. The last one we've got for the WTA Tour is the smaller event over in Portugal. It is currently underway. We've got a lot of players in action here. So I'm just going to glimpse over a number of these players, because at the end of the day, even though this is a smaller scale event, it's really, or it positions those last, let's say, 4 players to track later on this season. So we're going to touch on, I think, the first round results. But what's, I think, more meaningful here is when we touch on, I think, the results next week after the event has wrapped up. Let's have a look at who makes the finals and if they're able to maintain that level of play throughout the season. Some do, some don't, but there are some very interesting metrics there. All right, Kraus over Knudsen straight sets, Bay over Stefani straight sets, Lucas over Koever-Mans straight sets, Torsen over Monet, Parks fell to Zarazua, Ondiva over Iala, Fale over Preston straight sets Lepachenko, over Shmarova straight sets, my apologies there. Jones over Masarova, that's a very good win for her. Dart over Garcia, and we've got Parias Diaz over Matias. Now, I mentioned that last name a short time ago when we're looking at the rankings and those progressions. So we do have a couple of players here to keep our eyes on. Only one or two surprises here in respect to results. But look, we know these players aren't inside the top 20. They're really vying for that breakthrough. But let's have a look, because this is what really sets players apart if they're ranked inside the top 100 and they begin to track towards 80, 60, 50 and so on. We're yet to see it with these players, but it's going to be one to watch. All right, that really wraps up the WTA Tour so far over the past week. So let's head straight on over to the ATP Tour, and we've got some really good ranking movers to dive right into. Okay, first up, we've got Goffin sitting at 100. Slight regression there. Berrettini has had a very big regression, back 14 points. He's at 98. Remember, it was last week, although the week before, he had a very big progression back inside the top 100 with his performance and that title. The first, I think it was in 2 seasons, but this is a bit of a slap here with a very big, significant jump back. So I'm really looking forward to see if Berrettini can I guess, make those moves to hold on to a ranking and continuously progress and build upon that further. Kokkinakis, a very good progression, 12 points back inside the top 100. Really good to see. Monte, the 24-year-old from France, is up 9 points to 92. That's one to watch. Other players, we've got Wawrinka has tracked back 7. Slight regression now. He's 86 in the world. But let's remember, Wawrinka is 39 years of age. He's still able to hold his own. He hasn't had that many wins under his belt lately, but by no means have, I guess, any of those wins that his opponents have had been, I think, streamlined. All right, Bautista Agut, again, 36-year-old. We know Bautista Agut has been ranked inside the top 10 a number of seasons ago now, but he has progressed 6 points up to 84. Fuchsovic has taken a bit of a hit. He's back 5 places at 82. Curry is up 6 to 83. Nagal, very impressive. He broke into the top 100 a couple of weeks ago. Regressed slightly, but he's progressed slowly over the past few weeks, but 13 points up from his performance at Monte Carlo. And so he's up to 80 in the world. Other noteworthy players we've got is Kazoots is at 75. He's holding steady there, but we'll get to that shortly. Other players, as we track inside the top 70, Saboth Wild is pretty steady there at 67. Just some noteworthy players we've been keeping an eye on. Kaboli's at 61. Hafman is at 61. Kaboli is at 62. Tracking forward now and looking at some very big movers. Not so much at this range, but we've got Murray is up 3 points to 56. We have seen Murray around 50, just inside the top 50 this season. So clay court season is going to be interesting to see how Murray holds up. But come on, if he's 56 in the world, that's absolutely solid still. All right, Sonegro's up 6 points to 51. Evans just up 1 at 59. Other players, we've got Draper's back 7 at 46. Poprin's up 2, he's at 44. Tabilo from the Chilean, he's up 4 places, 41. Anali's back 2 at 40. Marazin's back 2 at 39. All right, Safulin, he had his performance against Djokovic, even though he did lose that one. He's up 3 points to 38. That was a good result for him. All right, up 3 places is Monfils to 37. Tracking forward now, Felix is up 1. Ogor Elisame is at 34 now in the world. Remembering that he's 23, has been a top 10 player. He's been trying to find that form again. Nori's back 1 at 31. Echeverry's up 1 at 30. All right, Quarter's a slight progression up 1. He's at 26. We know Quarter was sitting just outside the top 30, and he has been slowly tracking towards the top 20. I think the next couple of weeks will be very good indicators if he's reached another plateau, and or if he's primed to crack into the top 20. It's yet to see. Mazzetti's solid then at 24. TFO is solid at 23. Now we're inside the top 20. We haven't seen that many ranking movers early on, but look, Fritz has progressed back to 15 by 2 points. Shelton steady at 14, because we saw that very big, I think, ranking progression after Houston. Humpert's up 2 to 13, but how is this? This is what I've been getting at, and I have been harking on about this the last couple of weeks, if not so far this season. Rune is outside the top 10. He has regressed. He's at 12 now in the world, and that is very substantial. I've touched on this, a lot of coaching changes. He hasn't been able to, let's say, hold on to the team at hand. He said he wasn't feeling 100%, and why he's had some early round losses, but really his performance this season has not been correlating with a top 10 tennis ranking. Absolutely not. And this is, I think, the start of really showcasing that those, I think, performances have caught up to his ranking. Now at 12 in the world, I'm not going to be surprised if he regresses a little bit further. That said, he does have a number of ranking points to his name. So probably similar to Tsitsipas, is going to hold his own around this ranking range before potentially progressing back inside the top 10, as Tsitsipas has done, but that has taken a few weeks. So I really want to see many more wins under Rune's belt, putting in the work so we can see, I think, that level of consistency in his game again. De Minaur, he's strong at 11. We know he already has been a barrier breaker this season, and he really has been playing, I think, with Dimitrov and Hurkacz between, I think, 11, 10, 9 and back and forth. Very similar ranking points. He does have a very tough match next up in Barcelona with Nadal. We're going to touch on that shortly. So it's going to be very interesting to see the various implications for his ranking. I don't think we can fault De Minaur in any way, shape or form if he does fall to Nadal, depending on Nadal's obviously his level of play, but Alex is dangerous on any service any given day. All right, inside the top 10, like I've touched on, there have been some movers. Dimitrov is back 1, he's holding strong then at 10. Hurkacz is at 9, back 1. Rublev is back 2 at 8, and that is because Tsitsipas is up 5. With that win at Monte Carlo, a little bit of a surprise packet there, but I'll shortly touch on that. 7 in the world, followed by runner-up. Now he's 6 in the world. Both of these players have had their regressions. Tsitsipas and Rudd have been outside the top 10 this season. Rudd has cracked back into the top 10 prior. This season, Tsitsipas has now cracked back into the top 10. Both of these players are now barrier breakers for this season. However, they've also regressed outside and then in. So it's going to be very interesting to see if both of these players can hold their own. That said, Tsitsipas and Rudd, both, I think, historically have had their best results on clay, and given this season they are finding a new gear in contrast to other players, I guess, ranked inside the top 10. It's very close though. It's definitely one to watch. I think we're going to see a lot of shifts in the top 10, and it's going to be, very, very, I think, again, interesting to see. Zverev's holding his own at 5. He does have a number of points, I think, to leverage there. Likewise with Medvedev, he's a lot ahead of Zverev in this respect. And obviously we've got Djokovic, Sinner, Alcaraz. Alcaraz and Sinner, very close. That said, Alcaraz is out, and he's going to have a number of points to defend that he won't be given I think he has been sidelined and Sinner is in action, likewise with Djokovic. So there may be more of, let's say, a gap between Sinner and Alcaraz, and there's a chance for Sinner to gain a little bit more ground on Djokovic, especially in respect to, I think, the rankings and if he's going to continuously progress. But definitely these rankings are just really exciting to watch. Similar on, I think, the WTA Tour, but different metrics, different correlations, but there's a reason why we're seeing a lot of I think this shuffling going on. Okay, let's head into Monte Carlo. We know the results, we know what's happened, but let's track back to, I think, a couple of those performances from the round of 32 onwards. Last week we touched on the first round, but here we go. We know Djokovic had a good win over Sofin 1 and 2. However, that's why Sofin has had that progression in his ranking, because of that first round win. Mazzetti straight sets over Fils, Dumanor 3 sets over Griekensport, Poprin over Rublev. This was very impressive, 4 and 4. Sinegro over Ogor Elisame, straight sets. Humbert over Zhang. This is why we've seen that slight progression in his ranking. Hurkacz over Bautista Agut, straight sets. Rudd over Tipolo. Zverev over Offner, straight sets. Tsitsipas over Echeverry. This is very solid, 1 and 0. Kakanakov over Cerundo, 3 sets. Medvedev over Monfils, straight sets. Rune over Nagal, 3 sets, but way to go for Nagal to take Rune to 3 sets. Dimitrov, straight sets over Kakanakov. Struff over Correa, and Sinner over Korda, 1 and 2. Just shows that differentiation there with Sinner 2 in the world, Korda inside the top 30, and how clean that win was. All right, Sinner over Struff in the round of 16, 4 and 2. Very good win for Rune over Dimitrov in the round of 16, 7-6, 3-6, 7-6. Very tight, given that Dimitrov is top 10 and he has had a stellar season so far. That said, Rune does have a number of points. He was ahead of Dimitrov in the rankings at this point. And even though he has regressed in the rankings, this is just one performance to, I think, look at, which is a positive for Rune, but that level of consistency has not been there to correlate with that ranking. And that's why that ranking regression does, in fact, align with his performances. Okay, Kakanakov, a very good win over Medvedev, 3 and 7-5. Tsitsipas, this was a very good win over Zverev, 7-5, 7-6. This was the match that really, I think, intrigued me with Tsitsipas's performances. I was expecting/anticipating Zverev to walk away with the win, potentially 2-3, but this, I think, was Zverev's, Tsitsipas's standout match to really put him back on the radar, in contrast to his continued regression. So he's cut that I mean that in a very clean way, to progress obviously back inside the top 10. Hurkacz fell to Rudd. This was another very good match, given Hurkacz's title last week. Rudd's got, I think, a title under his belt already this season, or he's made the finals of some. But look, 4 and 2 over Hurkacz. This is another very solid result. All right, Sinegro fell to Humbert, 3 sets. Dimonor straight sets over Poprin. Djokovic 5 and 3 over Mazzetti. Okay, we're up to the quarterfinals now. This was a very good win for Djokovic, 7-5, 6-4 over Dimonor. We know Dimonor, I think, already has a win over Djokovic this season, or maybe it was last season, but that's a very good result for Djokovic, very clean. All right, Rudd over Humbert, 3 sets. Tsitsipas over Kakanakov, 4 and 2. Sinner over Rune, very good result for Sinner, 6-4, 6-7, 6-3. I got to give it to Rune, even though his ranking has regressed. This was a very good match for him. If he continues this level and these type of results against his fellow top 10, that isn't the case right now, he will track back inside the top 10. However, If this regresses and these results regress, his ranking we will see probably slip back to around 15, but still inside the top 20. But that will take a lot given the amount of points he has under his belt. Okay, this was a very good one. Semi-finals now. Rudd over Djokovic, 6-4, 1-6, 6-4. Very big one. And then Tsitsipas over Sinner. Very big, a little bit of controversy this match, but 6-4, 3-6, 6-4, very stellar match for, I think, on both. The semi-finals really were jam-packed, but then obviously we've got Tsitsipas over Rudd in the finals, 6-1, 6-4. Probably we were not anticipating that first set being, I think, so clean from Tsitsipas's perspective, but this really puts both of these players on the map. Clay season, not too sure. I'm going to disagree here with their rankings inside the top 10 at their levels. I think 10 and say 8 respectively, Tsitsipas and Rudd. Granted that Rudd's already been inside the top 10. However, we are going to see very soon in the next couple of weeks if these players are going to maintain or regress, although they did get a number of points given, I think, the magnitude of Monte Carlo. All right, now it's time to switch on over to Barcelona, which has just gotten underway this week. And I think, as I touched on earlier, we've got Nadal back in action, which really, I think, adds another layer. Okay, very early on, so we're only going to touch on the first round results of Barcelona. So next week we really will, I think, wrap up, I think, the winners, the standout results here, ones to watch moving forward. Okay, we've got Van Asch over Zhang, 5-2, again, first round. Diaz Acosta over Rincon, 1-4. It'll be interesting to see next round, and there are a couple we will touch on shortly. Caballas Bain over Greiner, 2-4. Offner over Kotov, 3 sets. That's a very good win for Offner. Nadal, first win in some time now, over Caboli, 2-3. Obviously Nadal is not seeded, and that is why we will see him play de Minaur in the second round, which I am really looking forward to, because I think that is an exceptional match for Nadal to see where his level of play is at. Granted, Roland Garros is now a matter of weeks away, and to allow Nadal to better, I think, gauge his form, and de Minaur's an exceptional player to use as a benchmark there. Altamar, very solid win over Popyrin. Granted that Popyrin really has been on a roll, but Altamar 3-7, 6. We've got Macaque over Shang, 4-4. Schwartzman has been qualifying, holding strong, but he has fallen to Lachovic, 6-1, 6-2. Analdi over Kazuks, 5-5. Kazuks, unfortunately, we've seen that images off that ankle is absolutely brutal. So hopefully we'll wish Kazuks a really speedy recovery there. All right, Trangaliti over Adjakovic, 6-2, 7-6. My apologies for the pronunciation. If you've been listening for some time now, you know I really do try my best, but my apologies there. All right, and then we've got Monor over Nishioka, 3-1. Ramos Vinolos fell to Muller, 7-6, 6-love. Wrapping up, I think, these first round matches, we've got Bautista Agut over Sufulin, 6-3, 7-6. That's actually very good, because Sufulin got that first round win at Monte Carlo, fell to Djokovic. Bautista Agut's back inside the top 100, let's say holding steady there. So he'll get a couple of extra points here for this win. So maybe we'll see him back inside the top 90 next week, but it's too soon to tell. Mayo over Cashin, 3 sets. Hart over Landalucci, 3 sets, and a very good win for Nakashima over Evans at 7-6, 6-2, which brings me now to the second round of 32, and Nakashima, a stellar win over Rublev, 6-4, 7-6. That was a very big upset. That said, over the last, I'm going to say 2 to 4 weeks, Rublev has not been playing the form we know he can play as that top 10 player. And I think, hinting towards a very subtle regression. Too early to tell. Rublev has been inside the top 10 for, I want to say, the best part of the 2-3 seasons now. He's really been, I think, under the radar, holding his own, but maybe time has come for that regression. So it's, again, too soon to tell, but this is one milestone that is noteworthy. Echeverry over Hart, 7-5, 6-2, second round. Norrie over Mayo, 7-6, 6-7. That is a very, I think, well, we won't say that's a win. That's definitely a walkover from Mayo, but that is incredibly close from both parts. So that's unfortunate for Mayo, who qualified to, I think, walk away from that match. Bautista Agut will play Vasori's second round. All right, a couple of other matches that we've got, because there's only a few that have been underway so far. Arnaldi over Baez is 3 sets, and that may be it. I think a big attention is going to be on Tsitsipas over versus Offner in the second round, aside from obviously Nadal and De Minaur. They're really the standout ones. And the last match we've really got is Diaz Acosta over Coric, 6-2, 7-5. That's a very good win for Diaz Acosta. All right, that wraps up Barcelona. So let's head over to Munich. That is underway in Germany. We've got the BMW Open. First round, a couple of them are underway. We're not yet into the second round. So we'll wrap again that up next week. We've got Rodionov over Vucic in straight sets, Mitchell over Rieberg straight sets, Garin, a good win over Kopfer, who is seated here in straight sets. Fritz is in action in this event. This is going to be very interesting to see, given that his recent ranking regression. Let's be mindful though, he did crack back into the top 10 early this season. He's regressed outside the top 10 this season. These have been predicted with our analytics. However, he has not been able to string together a number of wins yet, and that's why he is still remaining outside the top 10. But clay court season, maybe it'll be a little bit different to Fritz, although historically hard court is, I think, Fritz's favourite surface. Though it's going to be very interesting again to see. Theme qualified, he has been struggling. We know that this season he's fallen to Moro Canas 4-4 in the first round. Mollica over Pissarro straight sets, Draper over Kopriev 3 sets, Felix Auger-Aliassime, a very good win first round here, 6-7, 7-6, 7-6. I think this one went over 3 hours against Matera, but it's a very, I think, big confidence booster for Felix to put under his belt. Daniel over O'Connell 3-4. Van der Schopp over Gakov 3 sets. Shvenko fell to Hanfman in 3 sets. Hustler over Topo 3 sets. And then we've got Gallen over Ugo Carabelli in straight sets. A lot of them are tongue twisters. I really do apologize for the pronunciation, but this is very early on. And Zverev we've got as the first seed here. It's going to be very interesting to keep tabs on, as well as Fritz, who is the 3rd seed, and what happens, and if Felix, how deep he can go this event. And I think as well as Rune is in action. He did get a bye first round, but especially with his recent ranking regression, how these players, I think, wrap up next week is definitely one to watch. All right, the final for today's episode and on the ATP Tour is the event over in Romania, the Tirac Open. Cerundo is the first seed, so it's a smaller event underway, but still noteworthy to be mindful of, because Cerundo, my apologies there, has been tracking in the rankings very steadily. We've got Korea with a win over Bonzi, 4-2. We've got Sayboth Wild, who has also been tracking a very good win over Nardi there. Both of these players are noteworthy this season. There's 3 sets, 6-3, 6-7, 7-6. Navone are over Darderi, 2 and 3 quarters in action this tournament, so it'll be interesting to see how far he tracks. Kekanovic over Goffin, 3 sets. Martinez over Turbener, 3 sets. Senegro fell to Fonseca in 3 sets. And then we've got Albo over Kokovic in 3 sets. Rendonech over Gaston in 3 sets. And then we've got Borges with a very good win over Wawrinka, 3-6, 7-5, 6-2. Shapovalov fell to Monte, 4 and 2. Where again, Shapovalov has been inside the top 10 and he has steadily regressed the last couple of seasons. It'll be really good to see him back, I think, progressing, but we're yet to see, I think, those streamlined level of performances to correlate with a ranking progression consistently so far this season. And the last match is Vukcevic over Varchos, 7-6, 6-2. I really need to apologise for the pronunciation for a number of players there, but I think what's really important is to see if Surundolo can maintain that seeded result, how Sayboth Wild goes. This is a good event for him. Quarter, if this is an event to see if he cracks inside the top 25, but also I think for Borges with that win over Wawrinka, how deep he can go, and Gregenspor. We've seen some standout results from him where he's had those first, second round solid wins at the bigger events, but we'll wrap that up next week. So that's really it from both the WTA and ATP tours so far. There's a lot I think we've covered, from the Billie Jean Cup, the Porsche Open, and really I think Barcelona's the standout this week on the ATP tour. And again, we've wrapped up Monte Carlo with some really big results there, some standout performances, and more so with the rankings to be mindful of on the ATP tour. Newcomers, but those newcomers are already seasoned top 10 players who are back inside the top 10. Tsitsipas is the really big one, and also Rudd nudging closer towards, I think, breaking into the top 5 again. We know he's been there before. How Sinner's going to perform this week with, I think, Alcaraz out of action. Likewise with how Djokovic and his rankings, I think, we're going to see a bit of a fluctuation there if Sinner, I think, catches up to speed. And of course on the WTA tour, let's see how Pegula starts tracking to hold her own inside, let's say, that top 50%. Likewise with Sakari, Gorf, Sabalenka, Swiatek all in action. Likewise, I think also we've seen Ostapenko with that slight regression. If that impacts her ranking this week, seeing how I think Kasatkina performs if she breaks into the top 10. Vondrousova as well is in action. See how she tracks alongside Zheng. If we see Zheng holding her own with her ranking, or if that's followed by a regression. Because look, at the end of the day, where it's all about tracking these results and these performances, I think, with their rankings, because there are so many, I think, relative data implications and various correlations for these specific players if they maintain their hold inside the top 10, whereas only 50% of players currently on both the WTA and ATP tours are really aligning, which is an incredibly, I think, important metric to pinpoint and be incredibly mindful of over the next coming weeks, especially when we're looking at key metrics, the 8 keys that start with the 7 keys, amplified again by the 8th key. We've touched on that in previous episodes, but more so when we're really serious about looking at the trajectory and what you really need to do to track closer and closer towards achieving that top 10 tennis ranking. so much for joining us today. I think today's episode was really jam-packed with metrics, with data, looking at, I think, the rankings, various implications, but more so the results. There are a lot of tongue twisters there for me today. If I have mispronounced your name, I really do apologize. But let's have a look at how these players are performing. I know we've wrapped up some key events in today's episode from Monte Carlo and the Billie Jean Cup, but really the other events underway are going to be very interesting to wrap up next week, and if those performances then correlate with their rankings. And look, to grab a copy of my new release, How to Develop a Top 10 Tennis Ranking, head on over to AIMA International, or you can also find it on Amazon, irrespective where you are based in the world. For any comments or questions, head to AIMA International or Topic Thread, the social platforms, head on Data Privacy. To interact with Beyond Top 10 Tennis, head on over to Twitter, Instagram or YouTube. To catch up on our blogs, head on over to AIMA International and look for our blog tab, or head on over to Medium. And as always, I'll leave all the links in the episode notes. For something a little bit different, head on over to Pink Octopus Books. That's where my fictional release is. For something left of field, visit Spruik for some random polls. And of course, if you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe, like, share, and all of the above would be absolutely phenomenal. For those of you who are interested, we do have scholarships available on AIM International, as well as options to work with me exclusively to optimize your performance to nudge you close towards that top 10 tennis ranking. So don't be shy and come and say hi. On that note, thank you so much for listening. I am so incredibly grateful. I am your host, Dr. Ashley Morgan Berge, and this is Beyond Top 10 Tennis, and I'll see you next time.